Welcome. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We try to build this thing up. The goal is 1,000 subscribers by the end of the Packers season. Bye week upon us. Kind of a good reflection point to see where the Packers are at. And I don't think I'm in the minority when I say after the first two games, wins against Detroit and Washington, my headspace I was in with the Packers was that of one who thought 3-1 at the bye was kind of worst case scenario. Yes, you had two road games coming up after two home games to start the season, but at Cleveland, at Dallas, knowing kind of how the Browns had started the season and how the Packers have fared historically against the Cowboys in Jerry World, and then you add in that they didn't have CeeDee Lamb for that Sunday night game, which we found out later. After the first two games, I was very much in the camp that 3-1 was worst case scenario, and that there was a path for the Packers to start 4-0 heading into the bye week. Instead, we sit here, they are 2-1-1, and so I'm kind of just trying to get the vibe of how everyone's feeling about where the Packers are at. I think had you said before the season, the tie is just weird, and I mentioned it in the instant reaction video on Sunday night, like figure out a way to get rid of ties. It shouldn't be that difficult. If college football doesn't have ties, why the hell does the National Football League have tie games as an option in the regular season? Shouldn't exist. But had I said before the season 2-1-1, but the two wins were over Detroit and Washington, maybe you sign up for that. I don't know. It's kind of a weird spot that Green Bay's in, because after the first 2 weeks, the expectations rose to a sky-high level, and Green Bay laid an egg in Cleveland, and then defense couldn't get off the field after the first quarter and a half, 2 quarters against Dallas. I know that late turnover led to a one-play touchdown drive for Dallas. We'll actually get to that a little bit down the road in this video. So I'm kind of just seeing how everyone's feeling. I want to go over a couple of notes, things that have stood out, because if you go back to that game on Sunday night, Green Bay's opening drive was a masterpiece. It lasted 8 plays. The Packers went 69 yards, and besides a false start penalty against Sean Ryan, it was a pretty flawless drive. Like, these scripted drives for Green Bay have been really good, and that was another one against the Cowboys to start the game on Sunday night. And the second drive came unglued after a quick start to it, but there was a holding call peppered in the middle by Jordan Morgan that just kind of offset the entire drive for Green Bay. And that theme of penalties, especially on the offensive line, whether it's pre-snap penalties with false start or holding calls on the offensive line, it's a theme that has not subsided so far in these 4 weeks. Even in the wins, right? Even in the good against the Lions and the Commanders, penalties, pre-snap penalties on the offensive line have become a constant issue that the Packers, for whatever reason, just haven't been able to get a grasp on and haven't been able to get under control. There's 2 stats for me that stick out like a sore thumb for the Packers among many entering the bye. The first is that Green Bay's tied for the third highest amount of penalties per game at 8.8. Third highest mark in the league, 8.8 penalties per game. And over the course of the first 4 weeks to start the year, it hasn't really gotten better. If anything, it's gotten worse, which is kind of the alarming part, because if you're entering the bye week in week 5 and you're looking at some things that need to get cleaned up, certainly the penalties are near the top of the list when you have the third highest per game average at 8.8. But the issue Green Bay's being faced with is that it's gotten, worse and worse as the games have gone along. If you look back in week 1, Green Bay had 4 penalties against Detroit. Pretty good, right? 4 penalties, that'd be near a league best, right? Right, like right near the top of the pecking order if you only have 4 penalties per game. In week 2 against Washington, it bumped up to 10 penalties, and then it all came to a boiling point in week 3 against Cleveland when the Packers had 14 penalties against the Browns. So you went from 4 to 10 to 14. Now, in Jerry World on Sunday night, it was back down to 7, but there were a couple decline penalties, and 7 still isn't really great by any stretch of the imagination, but for this team, with how it's been, it almost feels like a whale of an accomplishment to only have 7 penalties called on it throughout the duration of a game. And I will say among the most frustrating ones are the pre-snap penalties we're seeing, especially on the offensive line and, quite frankly, on the defensive line. There's been a handful of plays where a defensive lineman for Green Bay is lined up in the neutral zone. upon the snap of the football, which is just head-scratching that it keeps happening. And if you want to look at another number, the second one that pops out to me, first one that I mentioned is the penalties overall for Green Bay. They're near the top of the league when it comes to most penalized teams in the National Football League. Among pre-snap penalties throughout the NFL, Green Bay is only trailing Minnesota, and that's not a good only trailing Minnesota phrase that I'm using. They're only trailing Minnesota, who has more pre-snap penalties than Green Bay. So the Packers are 31st in the NFL when it comes to pre-snap penalties, or second, however you want to view it. No one has had more pre-snap penalties than Green Bay besides the Minnesota Vikings. It's just, and there's weird ones. Like the kick the Browns made as time expired in week 3 to beat Green Bay. Was it a 56-yarder? It was somewhere around there. Had that 56-yarder gone wide left, wide right, whatever, Cleveland would have had another crack at it. Why? Because Green Bay lined up offsides. And so that's a pre-snap penalty that got declined. It doesn't even count. Like, Green Bay has the second most pre-snap penalties. That was one, and it doesn't go in the books because the Browns declined it, of course, because the field goal sailed through the uprights as time expired to beat Green Bay. I would say the glaring issue for the pre-snap penalties are that it's not just one party or two parties involved. Like, if there were two players really carrying the weight for this, that they were constantly getting pre-snap penalties, you could maybe zone in on it with them, but this is kind of just across the board. Like, Elton Jenkins had a false start against Dallas. Sean Ryan had a false start against Dallas. Darian Kennard had a false start against Dallas. And I know there might be a few people that sit on the other side and they'll be like, penalties happen, everyone gets them. And I understand that, but the tougher pill to swallow in that category amongst all the penalties are the pre-snap ones. And Green Bay's second in the NFL in that department, which is just not good. And really nobody has been exempt. Like I mentioned, the defensive line, Micah Parsons, who's been phenomenal for Green Bay so far, he was flagged twice against the Browns in week 3 for lining up offsides, not jumping into the neutral zone and then they snap the ball, like just lining up offsides right at the snap of the ball. So nobody has really been exempt from this. I'll say it's not the only area the Packers need to clean up, some of the things that have plagued the Packers. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It takes 2 seconds. It helps me immensely. Please click the subscribe button. I'm always, always appreciative of all the support. I don't say that as a passing line. I truly am. To me, one of the big themes for Green Bay entering the bye week is how the hell do you get out of your own way? Just get out of your own way. If Green Bay doesn't shoot itself in the foot over and over and over again, they probably beat the Cleveland Browns. If Green Bay doesn't shoot itself at some pretty inopportune times against Dallas, they probably win that game. And so a lot of this for the Packers isn't like we're looking at issues and, oh my gosh, the passing game is a mess and the execution is horrendous and the defense, the Dallas game was bad for the defense, but the first 3 weeks, it's not like we're like, oh my gosh, they're just trying to scratch and claw to get off the field. They can never get off the field. And those aren't the issues. The issues for Green Bay are pre-snap penalties. You're just shooting yourself in the foot, and turnovers, mistakes at, again, inopportune times for the Packers. And that's where it becomes very, very frustrating, where if you can just get out of your own way, if you're the Packers, you're probably 3-1, maybe 4-0 at the bye, because we all know about the Jordan Love interception against the Browns in week 3. Green Bay was leading 10-3, a shade more than 3 minutes to go in the game. Cleveland's offense to that point had been completely lifeless. If that interception isn't thrown, it's fair to believe the Packers definitely win that game. On Sunday night, with the Packers leading 13-9 late in the first half, a blown assignment on the left side of the offensive line. Not all Jordan Love's fault by any stretch whatsoever. Jordan Love gets strip sacked from the blind side. And again, it's another scenario where you're up 13-9. There's like half a minute to go. I think there were 30 seconds left in the first half. Your worst case scenario, and we talked about this in the Browns game. We talked about it last year in the Lions game when there was a pick six by Kirby Joseph at the end of the first half. I mean, we've talked about it quite a few times in the last couple of years where it's like, again, Sunday night, you have the ball, 30 seconds left till half, you're up 13-9. Your worst case scenario is we're leading 13-9 at half. Instead, Love gets strip sacked. One play later, Dak Prescott finds George Pickens, and quite literally in the snap of a finger, you go from, hey, we're going to be leading at halftime, 13-9. It'd be great to try to get into field goal range for McManus, maybe extend it to a 16-9 lead, but we're going to be up 13-9 at half. And all of a sudden, that script completely flips upside down, and you're trailing 16-13 at the break because of another inopportune turnover that doesn't all go on the plate of Jordan Love, because the offensive line clearly on the left side whiffed on an assignment. And those are building up to a point where it's like, why is this happening? Seemingly happening more frequently for the Packers in these end-of-half situations, in these critical situations of a game. It seems like it's happening more for Green Bay than other teams. And I went back and I watched that last drive, and we can appreciate a team keeping the foot on the gas. We can appreciate staying aggressive. I often lobby for it. Like when Green Bay punted 4th and 4 at the Dallas 45 in that game, I was like, what are we doing? Just go for it. Like, be the aggressor. And so I can always appreciate keeping the foot on the gas. And look at the end of overtime. Like, Lord knows the Packers could have used the mindset of foot on gas, be the aggressor at the end of overtime, instead of, seemingly playing for a tie in that situation, which was weird. But they opted to be the aggressor, not at the end of overtime, which was weird, but instead at the end of the first half. And they did so even after a false start on Kennard. It moved the Packers back 5 yards, and it set up a 1st and 15 from their own 32-yard line with 20-some seconds left at that point. I think there was like 26 seconds left. And so, again, I like trying to get into field goal range, but why are you being aggressive in that spot? 1st and 15 from your own 32 with less than 30 seconds left in the first half, up 13-9. But at the end of overtime, it seems like you're trying to play just not to give Dallas the ball back with any time left, and you seem content to just kick a field goal as time expires and tie that game. It was just it was bizarre to me. So even with the foot on the accelerator mentality at the end of the first half, you have to be calculated when you pick your spots in those moments, and you can't have the back-breaking turnovers that Green Bay has had now in back-to-back weeks. If that strip sack doesn't happen, who's to say what the final score reads? Maybe it doesn't read 40-40 tie at the end of it. If the pick against the Browns doesn't happen, the Packers certainly win that game. And those mistakes turn into massive narratives, sometimes rightfully so. If you want to credit Grant Delpit, the safety for the Browns, he made a great play on that interception in Week 3. If you want to credit the Dallas defense for getting to Jordan Love on that strip sack at the end of the first half, that's fine to do so. But a lot of this circles back to the Packers and their inability to just get out of their own way. And I think that's something that has to be focused in on during this bye week. Like, championship teams typically aren't going to be flagged at the second highest mark in the entire NFL for pre-snap penalties. Championship level teams typically aren't going to have the third highest or tied for the third most penalties per game. Championship teams aren't going to be making the turnovers. Every team turns it over. Every team throws picks. Every team fumbles the ball. For the Packers, they've been coming at, again, I'm going to use the same phrase, the same line. They've been coming at the most inopportune times for the Packers, and typically that doesn't happen a bunch for championship teams, and the Packers certainly have time to correct it, but it's been popping up on the radar way too frequently these first 4 weeks. Mitch, I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciative of all the support. It takes 3 seconds, 2 seconds, maybe just boom. Click the subscribe button. Looking at the Packers bye week, the good, the bad. I won't say the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I don't think that's how I would phrase it for the Packers through 4 weeks. Certainly disappointing, a bit agitating when you start 2-0 against two heavy hitters in the NFC, and then you lay an egg against Cleveland, and then you tie the Dallas Cowboys, who were without CeeDee Lamb. One area I'm not worried about that some of you still may be worried about, which is fine. For me, the running game. After that game against Dallas, and I know it's one game, it's a small sample size, it's 60 minutes, but I'm not worried about the running game for Green Bay. And in the first 3 weeks of the season, Josh Jacobs had 3 rushes total of 10 yards or more. Again, first 3 games of the season, Josh Jacobs had 3 total runs of 10 yards or more. He had that against Dallas. He had 3 runs against Dallas of 10 yards or more. And Jacobs, if you include the passing game, like he was responsible for a lot of chunk plays in a game where he looked like the 2024 version of himself, which we hadn't seen a lot of in the first 3 games of the season. Jacobs had runs, folks. Jacobs had runs against Dallas of 14, 18, and 19 yards. In the 18-yarder was that beautiful scamper on the right side, a cutback around the 5-yard line into the end zone. So that 18-yarder was a touchdown run. And then you look at who we can safely deem the bell cow of this offense, that is Josh Jacobs. He had receptions as well of 25 and 28 yards. And in totality, Josh Jacobs finished with 157 yards, his most in a Packers uniform. And he had a team-high 71 receiving yards against the Cowboys on Sunday night. And the running game was very much so on choppy ground entering the game against Dallas, and a lot of that had to do with the offensive line. And there's been no team that's had more different offensive line combinations through 4 weeks than the Green Bay Packers. And if you want to hear a stunning stat, that came courtesy of the game, courtesy of NBC on Sunday Night Football. I believe it said the Packers had 9 different offensive line combinations last year, and they already had 10 in the game against Dallas, coming into the game against the Cowboys. And that's going to make it difficult to get into rhythm, to get into sync with one another. That offensive line, there's 5 individuals on it, but they need to work in harmony together. And when you're constantly shuffling in different pieces in and out, it's difficult to get any sort of rapport down. I mean, Green Bay was down to its 3rd right tackle in Darian Kennard because Green Bay was missing Zach Tom. They were missing the rookie Anthony Belton in that game against Dallas. And then you're on your backup left guard with Aaron Banks out and subbing in Jordan Morgan, the first-round pick out of Arizona from 2 years ago. But there's a couple reasons I'm not worried about the run game. First was the game against Dallas. Like, it just kind of – it injected life into the idea, like, okay, this can look like 2024. Even with a banged-up offensive line and what the Packers would deem – although not say it, it wasn't their best 5 out there on the offensive line against Dallas. But we started to see those little glimpses of, oh, yeah, this is what it looked like last year when the Packers offense really hung its hat on the ground game. Green Bay would often start games with an explosive run game to open up the passing game. And this year it's been flipped. It's been the passing game that's been opening up the run game for the Packers. Josh Jacobs, folks, just to put some perspective on this, Josh Jacobs averaged 4.4 yards per carry last year for Green Bay, which was right in line with his career average of 4.3. So he averaged 4.4 yards per pop last year. On his career entering this year, that number was at 4.3. Entering Sunday night against the Cowboys through the first 3 games of the year, Jacobs was averaging 3.1 yards per carry. Now, exiting this game, it's still at a pedestrian 3.3 average, but it seems to be back on track and on the rise. And I mentioned earlier that opening sequence when I mentioned it, 8 plays, 69 yards, and a touchdown drive. And then I talked about just a minute ago, the Packers last year, it was the run game getting it going for the offense in a lot of games to open up the passing game. And this year it's been the passing game opening things up or trying to for a ground game that just hasn't fully clicked yet. And even on that opening drive against Dallas, 8 plays, 69 yards, and you end up in the end zone. Green Bay passed it effectively 5 times on that drive. Josh Jacobs had 3 carries that went for a combined -1 yard on that opening drive. So you talk about a masterpiece on that opening drive with the passing game, 8 plays, 69 yards, and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs had 3 carries for a combined -1 yard on that drive. And it was much of the same on the second scoring drive, although Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson both sprinkled in at least positive running plays. It was the passing game, though, carrying the weight. And sort of just like the first 2 games against Detroit and Washington, the running game gained more of a pulse in the second half, but unlike those games against the Lions and Commanders, it looked different, it felt different. It was more of a major impact that the running game had against Dallas than what it had in the second half against the Lions in Washington. Jacobs just kind of started ripping off one chunk run after another in the second half, and instead of keeping, like, there were times in the game against Dallas and Washington where you felt like Green Bay kept running it to no effect, but it was just because It didn't want to become one-dimensional. It didn't want to pass. Like, you want to try to keep that balance. Against Dallas in the second half, it wasn't, hey, we're running the ball just so we don't become predictable and one-dimensional. It was the Packers running the ball because the running game was finally complementing the passing game for the Packers, and we've kind of been starving to see that, and it finally came to the light against the Cowboys. I'll also say this. One reason I'm not worried about the running game, and this is the big point within all of it. For those still worried about the ground game entering the bye week, let me show you what awaits Green Bay coming out of the bye week. The Packers have faced the Browns, Lions, Commanders this year. Cleveland, folks, is first in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per game, 70.3. They're allowing 70.3 rushing yards per game, and they have faced Green Bay with Josh Jacobs. They have faced Baltimore already with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. They just faced Detroit with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And Cleveland is first in rushing yards allowed per game at 70.3. Detroit is number 7 in the NFL at 94 rushing yards allowed per game. And Washington checks in at number 14, so right around the middle, but still on the first half side of things. So Green Bay so far has faced in 3 of its 4 games the number 1 rushing defense, the number 7, and the number 14. Coming out of the bye week, in order, the Packers will face Cincinnati, Arizona, Pittsburgh, Carolina, Philadelphia, the New York Giants, and Minnesota. The only formidable team in that group against the run so far this year has been the Cardinals. Cincinnati, who you get right out of the bye, 26th in rushing yards allowed per game. Pittsburgh, 19th. Carolina, 23rd. For all the good the Eagles defense has, for all the good it brings to the table, they are number 21 when it comes to rushing yards allowed per contest. The Giants are 29th. The Vikings are 24. So again, just to bundle this up, try to drill this into your head. I know it's a lot of different ranking numbers. So far this year, the Packers have faced the number 1, the number 7, and the number 14 teams in rushing yards allowed per game. Coming out of the bye, Green Bay will get in that same category the 26th ranked team, the 19th, the 23rd, the 21st, the 29th, and the 24th. There will be ample opportunity for the Packers to build off what the ground game displayed against the Cowboys. That opportunity will come right away against a Bengals defense that just allowed 186 rushing yards to Denver on Monday night, including 101 to J.K. Dobbins. Cool story for J.K. Dobbins, too. Guy just one brutal injury after another, and now finally seems healthy. Saw it a little bit with the Chargers last year, coming into his own in Sean Payton's offense in Denver. 101 rushing yards against Cincinnati this past Monday night. The ground game to me is fine. It felt re-energized against the Cowboys, especially in that second half. And you just look at who they will be facing coming out of the bye. It's a lot of teams that aren't just like, they're iffy against the run. It's like, no, the Bengals have been terrible against the run. The Giants have been terrible against the run. The Vikings have been terrible against the run. Eagles, 21st. Pittsburgh, 19th. Carolina, 23rd. Like, there's going to be plenty of chances for Josh Jacobs to feast. Last thing I want to look at. We're combining a lot into one video. Packers bye week. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Nate Hobbs, Carrington Valentine. I am not giving up on Nate Hobbs. I don't know how much the knee surgery he had in, was it early August? That kept him out of preseason, the rest of training camp, kept him out of week 1 against Detroit. We don't know how much that's lingering. We don't know if he's truly back at 100%, if he's perhaps still shaking off some of the rust. Regardless, I do think for the foreseeable future, I'd like to see Carrington Valentine, CV, and Nate Hobbs get way more closer to a 50-50 split when it comes to the reps at the cornerback 2 spot behind Keyshawn Nixon. Hobbs allowed a 135.4 passer rating when targeted by Dak Prescott and had a horrific 51.6 coverage grade according to Pro Football Focus on Sunday night. And during that flurry where Dallas scored 5 touchdowns in 6 possessions, Hobbs was directly responsible for 2 of those 5 touchdowns. He was like the main culprit in coverage. Valentine, I get like Valentine was not much better. The whole secondary, pretty abysmal against Dallas. Like, you want a number per PFF, This just shocked me. Dak Prescott was 12 for 14 for 160 yards and a touchdown when facing pressure. We all know look at Jordan Love's numbers when facing a clean pocket this year. Not many doing it better in the NFL. When faced with a clean pocket, not many better than Jordan Love this year, truly. We all know quarterbacks' numbers dip off when they're facing pressure because you're being pressured. You're being harassed. Dak Prescott, when facing pressure, when under siege on Sunday night against Green Bay, 12 for 14, 162 yards, and a touchdown. Those are absurd numbers. You just tip your cap to Dak Prescott for how damn good he was against Green Bay's defense, just shredding them up, especially that last play going into halftime for their offense where they scored, and then just dominating in the second half. So I'm not just circling in on Nate Hobbs' performance against Dallas or Carrington Valentine's because CV certainly struggled. It was an all-around kind of disaster when you give up 40 points when the first 3 weeks, would they allow total? I said it the other day. Now I'm going to look it up. Was it 42 or 44? Like the Packers weren't allowing, and I'm talking combined. So, gosh, and I'm not a mathematician. 13 to the Lions, 13 to the Browns is 26, and then 18 to the Commanders. So Green Bay allowed 44 combined points, and that's against high-powered Detroit offense, high-powered Commanders offense, and certainly not a great offense in Cleveland. But 44 combined points the first 3 weeks, 40 against Dallas on Sunday night. And again, I'm not just going to circle Hobbs or CV, but there's an overarching point here that the two need to be closer to a 50-50 split when it comes to snap count totals. And I think the proof with it is kind of just in the pudding. And Valentine, like I said, wasn't much better. But in the first few weeks, you're looking at a former 7th-round pick who was pretty locked down at cornerback for Green Bay. And I mentioned Hobbs. We don't know. Like, it's plausible he's still working out the kinks to get back to 100% after the knee surgery. Whether that's the case or it's just Hobbs isn't what the free agent deal he received, if he just isn't up to snuff with that, I don't know. But what I do know is it's time to plug Valentine in more. In week 3 against Cleveland, Nate Hobbs logged 48 snaps at cornerback. Carrington Valentine had 22. Against Dallas, very similar. Hobbs, 46 snaps. Valentine, 24. And based off CV's play to start the season and how Hobbs has looked, the change needs to happen. It's warranted. Against the Lions, folks, Carrington Valentine played all 67 snaps on defense because Hobbs was out. CV played 100% of the snaps. He was targeted just twice by Jared Goff. He finished second on the team with a pass coverage grade of 75.8. Against Washington, Valentine finished second on the team with a pass coverage grade of 79.7. He allowed just 1 reception on 4 targets. And that's, a Detroit team that has Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's a Washington team that has Deebo Samuel, scary Terry McLaurin. Like, good, really, really, really good. All-pro Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're talking about that type of tier of wide receivers that Green Bay faced. And in the first 2 games, Carrington Valentine was super. He was tremendous. The Dallas game was bad for everyone. Hobbs has looked shaky even before that, going back to the Cleveland game. The politics that can factor into this will play a role. And when I talk about the politics, I'm talking about, hey, Carrington Valentine's a former 7th-round pick, still on his rookie deal. You just paid a large amount of money for Nate Hobbs to come over in free agency to be your CB2. And so the politics that come in, the egos that come into it can carry... They can play a role. Like, the Packers 4 weeks in aren't going to internally or outwardly express like, yeah, the Nate Hobbs deal has not worked out. This is bad. Like, they'd be foolish to suggest that. You have to let it marinate a little bit. You have to see if Hobbs can turn the corner, can figure it out, can get back. Maybe he is at 100%. If he is, that's even more scary. But maybe he's still working back from this the knee surgery. So Green Bay is not going to pull the plug, nor should they this early on Nate Hobbs. But getting to more of winning should supersede the politics of, hey, we paid Nate Hobbs a lot of money. this isn't looking good, but we're just going to hang on and hope to the gods that it does work out. Like, winning supersedes all of it. And I think there's a happy medium you can find where on one hand you have Valentine, a 7th-round pick who has developed into a starting caliber cornerback in the NFL, and on the other hand you have Hobbs, who signed a 4-year, $48 million deal with a $16 million signing bonus. And so you want to give him every opportunity to show he can be worth that for Green Bay. But at some point, you just have to put your best guys on the field and let it roll. And this isn't to suggest that giving up on Nate Hobbs should be the plan. That'd be more than premature. But until he starts to show it, giving Valentine an equal opportunity in terms of snaps played should be the blueprint for Green Bay. And that could help Nate Hobbs and certainly would give CV more of an opportunity, a guy who just balled out week 1 against Detroit and week 2 against Washington. So we'll see if that, again, it was 48-22 snaps played in week 3, and it was 46-24 against Dallas, both in favor of Hobbs. But based on how he's looked and how Carrington Valentine looked through 3 weeks, just he and the whole defense kind of laid an egg in week 4, I think it warrants more of a 50-50 split. Those are all my bye week thoughts. I know there's a lot more that we could go through. We might have another video, maybe that I'm going to drop this one. Recording on Thursday, drop it on Thursday. Maybe we'll have one for Friday too, a little, food for thought for the weekend. But those were my main points. The pre-snap penalties are insane. It has to stop. Like, you have to get it under control. The penalties as a whole, you have to get under control. I'm not concerned about the running game. And then if we want to really zoom in on one area, one battle, I think Carrington Valentine and Nate Hobbs need more of a 50-50 split until you feel better about Hobbs moving forward. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Appreciate all the support. The goal's 1,000 subscribers at the end of the season. I can't get there if you don't just take the 2 seconds to click the subscribe button. Means a lot, costs you nothing. We'll see how the Packers do look coming out of the bye week, but that's for later down the road. Let me know what you guys and gals think. We'll see you next time.